Nika, we just look. We're actually gonna let you talk about that, but wait until FEC next week, and you can talk about it all you want. Okay. Okay. Great. Anyway, that's it for the news. Next up is talking about this Dengeki interview here. Now, first of all, I'd like to say that the full interview was kind of disappointing because half of it was talking to the CEO of Level 5 about their dumb games and Yokai Watch and stuff like that.
Oh, I love Yokai Watch.
Shut up.
I got Hover Nyan as my minion. He's just hovering around.
Yeah, cute.
Hover.
What is happening?
That's the sound he makes when he hovers.
I was hoping if we stared at him long enough, he'd explode. It didn't work. So apparently Yoshida and Hino, first of all, are pretty close friends, and they like have dinner together and go out to parties and stuff like that. I guess it explains why we got Yokai Watch in the game. But they talk about how whenever they basically get together outside of work, they still just talk about games and the interesting things that they've been implementing. Which I guess Yoshida
So that's a really quick talk
doesn't
then, right?
usually have a whole lot to talk about. What was interesting to I think most people, and actually it makes sense seeing how they've utilized Diadem and Eureka and the way that they've been developing it, but it's also, I think, just seeing them put it into words is a little disappointing to me, and I go back to what Aniro's been saying for a while now, and that's that FF14 needs some type of PTR, public test realm, but they says Yoshida wants readers to interpret this in a positive way, that content like Diadem and Eureka is like an experimental chamber involving trial and error. Does that not kind of rub people sort of the wrong way?
No, not at all.
No, because
actually.
that's what this stuff has to be, right? They've never done something like this before, and it has to involve trial and error. And the fact that they're not just saying we're just going to dump it there and leave it, like they,
okay, no, you're right. Obviously, the idea, like what they did with the Diadem, where you dump it and you just leave it, nothing happens to it. Yes, to me, that's like the biggest 100% most colossal failure you could have in an MMO. But I've also never been in an MMO or any type of online game where I feel like what they're giving us isn't finished. Sometimes there may be an event that I don't like, but I do always get the feeling that the content that has been dropped is a fully realized vision, and it's not just like we're mice in a maze trying to help them figure out what works and what doesn't work. I feel like most developers know what their visions are, and
or most MMOs have like a test server where people can test shit out, and for some reason we don't have that, because I guarantee you that if we had been in a test server with that for 2 days, they would have seen the NM train bullshit, and that would have been that, and they would have.
That is 100% true right there. Because I remember someone calling in once and pointing out that once something goes to PTR, it's not going to change much in its core development or the way that it's made going forward. You might get adjustments here and there. And
dude, if you just had levels 1 to 10 available for PTR and Eureka, you literally would have been able to see the NM train form by day number 5. You know what I mean?
God, it was like day 2 or 3, because when we first went in, like the very first time when the couple of us here went in and did Eureka, I got to level 5 just in that party killing random mobs, and that was fine. The next day I logged in and people had all of the NMs from 1 through 10 figured out, because nobody was higher than that yet the second day. But they had exactly where each NM spawned, exactly the timing, like when its respawn was, and there was already trackers and things when some of the NMs hadn't even been discovered yet. Like it was already figured out. So they would have realized how simple their formula was, and at least realized sooner that this probably wasn't the perfect system.
Well, hold on. Has Yoshi ever said that he didn't anticipate the NM's train becoming a thing? No. Or that he doesn't like it?
No, we haven't gotten an official word on that.
So how do we know that this isn't actually Yoshi's vision for Eureka?
Come on.
Because of how many times those words have come out of his mouth, like we didn't imagine the entire game.
That is kind of a staple Yoshi
training onto one hunt. Yeah. I feel like that's.
But I feel like there's like one of two reactions you can have to that as a developer. You can either go, okay, I can have all the intention in the world, but I don't know what players are going to do with it, and
that's always fair, I think.
And I think that like we saw that kind of attitude a lot in FF11, where they're like, okay, here's what it is. Now let's see what the community does with it. And when the community did something different with a job like Ninja in FF11 and started using it as a tank, Square Enix didn't overcorrect for that, right? Like they didn't be like, oh, well, now we got to take shadows away because
years later, when
this is not the intended purpose of the job.
Years later, they gave us more enmity tools.
Well, more than that, when asked about Ninja as a tank, they responded, and this is like again 4 or 5 years after Ninja. They're like, Ninja's not a tank. Well, what are you talking about?
I mean, but that's the thing is you can have all the intention in the world, but what the community does with that content is important. And I think we've seen a shift from Square Enix between FF11 and FF14, where now when the community does something that's not intended, the reaction from Square Enix is to dev that problem away.
Yeah, think about remember when someone found a better way to do Ninja's rotation for like a slightly increased DPS, and Square Enix was like, nuh-uh, nerf that.
Yeah, they slapped that down real quick.
Real fast.
Before we even knew what the new rotation was.
Yep.
So, but do you see the difference in approaches here, though? And what is surprising, I think, to me, and I think that this may be indicative of Yoshi P's leadership, is that, the way that I think an MMO developer needs to react to that is through input and testing. And I think that there is an incredible arrogance to go, well, we can internally test all of our content and we'll know exactly what the community is going to do with it.
Yep. See,
I think that's why things like Diadem didn't fundamentally work. The small content, the stuff that you can reasonably test internally.
4-man content, raid content.
Exactly. All of that does seem to work, right? Like all of it works as expected and as intended most of the time. But the 3 attempts that Square Enix has made at a system that strikes at something larger, that looks like a traditional MMO system, Diadem was an objective failure. Eureka gets it a little bit closer, and I'm willing to give them it's a test environment. Sure,
I'd say Eureka's a success in what we've gotten, especially compared to previous stuff.
Let's put a caveat on there. It's a relative success.
That's fair. I'll give you that.
In comparison to Diadem, I mean, Diadem was empty. 2 weeks out?
It might have even been quicker than that. Honestly,
you're being kind of generous.
Yeah. 2 weeks out was when it was I think some new weapon came out and basically made it all irrelevant.
So, like that to me says that it was a step more in the right direction. But the fact that it was divisive at all and divided the community on whether it was good or not, I mean, shit, I've taken flack over liking Eureka. Whether it be from our YouTube section or our chat, whatever. I've gotten dragged for it. I don't really care because it's optional whether you do it or not. You could not do any Eureka and clearly you wouldn't suffer any consequence from it.
Hold on, let me get this straight. You don't like the game, people get after you. You actually like the game and people still get after you.
Yeah.
Are you a game developer?
No, I'm not.
You got a hard life, man.
I just say opinions on the internet, and God forbid anyone ever do that.
Well, when you first brought up the idea of a PTR, obviously the first thing that my mind goes to is looking how other games utilize PTR, right? Blizzard has a PTR for all their games, I'm aware, but that PTR is always up. There's always something on there being tested, and I kind of looked at it as, well, there's never enough coming out for Final Fantasy XIV to need to be tested, but, I mean, is the PTR even something that has to be a thing that's always there? They could literally bring out a test server when they have something like Diadem where they need more than just their internal testing to be able to test it. Yeah, and I think that'll even be
you can do 3 weeks worth of a test on
and you know
something.
what, that would be a huge hit, because since it's technically a limited time thing, I think people would absolutely jump at the idea to be able to do something like that.
100%. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, again, I don't think that raid content needs to be included in there. I don't think story content needs to be included in there. I don't think dungeons need to be included in there, because Square Enix has gotten to a point where they can pretty well
in their sleep.
Yeah, they can pretty well finely tune those.
Need to be there either.
Exactly.
Like, they're past all that. Yeah.
Exactly. But the stuff that they're classifying, and clearly Yoshi P is thinking of it the same way, as trial and error content, and stuff that is bigger than can warrant internal testing, you've got to put that to a PTR.
Well, yeah, and kind of the way that I look at it too is you mentioned Diadem objective failures. Eureka does a lot of things right, but there's still some stuff that they probably didn't intend that had they had a PTR, they would have saw that beforehand. And it's at the point now where I think a lot of people who have done Eureka, who've stepped into Eureka, whether they've only, progressed a few levels and decided, this whole NM train thing isn't for me, or they went right to level 20, got all their stuff. Now they're like, all right, now I don't want to do it. Had they had a PTR and saw the NM train effect and decided we don't want that to happen, so let's figure out a way to fix it before it goes out to everyone, there's no way that everyone's going to try and jump on the PTR to have gotten that experience and then been like, oh, it's not for me, right? I wouldn't try out a PTR. I'd wait for it to come out and get the intended piece of content that they meant for us to play in the way that they meant for us to play it. And to go to an early comment you mentioned too, the biggest problem with having just that small internal testing is because these developers know how this system is supposed to function. Would they have ever even thought to be like, oh, let's go just like make a NM train go around killing the NMs one by one, because that's not the way that it was intended, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think and again, to kind of that point, I think what a public test realm would do is allow you to make those difficult decisions, like nerfing the XP from NMs and effectively killing the NM train without having to face a huge backlash from your general audience. If you fix it while it's still on PTR, I mean, yeah, there's probably going to be some bitching, but there's not going to be
people that are like, oh, I liked the test version better. Right. But I mean, in the end, more people are going to get what they intended, and I think it's going to be better in the long run.
As someone
totally agree.
As someone who follows what goes on the Blizzard PTR but doesn't actually play it, the worst that you're going to have is people release whatever the new PTR notes are, and some people might be like, oh, I hate that. Some people might not care, but as long as it doesn't come out, that's where it ends up stopping. So if you had a PTR and there's an NM train, some people might be like, oh yeah, that sucks. I wouldn't want to play that. That seems like a horrible design. But when it actually comes out, if it's not in there, that's it. It's gone now. It's history.
I think I think a PTR was harder to justify for Square Enix when the bulk of what they were putting out was dungeon and raid content.
Yeah, I think like you said, you didn't need it. Was attempted. I think that the PTR would been a great implementation.
Yeah, I agree. We want to hear from you. Give us a call. Limit Break Radio on Skype, 810-515-8715, limitbreakradio.com/Discord. We are going to be moving on to Stump the Staff trivia here in a few minutes. You can go ahead and line your calls up for that if you want, but we want to hear from you on Eureka and whether you think that Square Enix should implement a public test realm. Give us a call. Limit Break Radio on Skype, 810-515-8715, limitbreakradio.com/Discord.
Well, it's not necessarily too late for them to potentially come out with some type of test server for people to try things out, because they also said that they are trying new things with the Forbidden Land of Eureka, and even outside of Eureka, they have other plans for, quote, trial and error type of new content that is already under development, which they still cannot talk about, but they will be announcing it somewhere in the future. So,
see, now that actually encourages me, because
I hope so.
I liked out of everything that Eureka presented us with, I liked the adventurousness that Square Enix kind of took to get away from their normal pattern of content development, right? Like, that's what I appreciated about Eureka. Like, at least they were trying to put some sort of an alternate gameplay into FF14, and I appreciate the effort that was put there. Whether or not that succeeded, that's up to you, but I at least appreciated the effort, and to know that they're going to be trying that, continuing to have that kind of trial and error or adventurous spirit moving forward with not just Eureka but with other portions of the game, I actually think that that's fairly encouraging.
Yes, and
this quote is what encourages me. The next little bullet here says that he thinks that the fans will say, what, you were hiding content like this the whole time.
Yeah, also, it says
if I actually can say that, I will be in awe and I will bow down.
Yeah.
We'll have to see if that is actually something that comes out of my mouth.
All right,
it would be shocking.
Can we give them the full thing, Negan, not just a part of it?
Let's read the whole
Those
bullet.
future plans include a powered-up version of current content and also brand new content where players, yes, will say, what, you were hiding something like this the whole time. And Nero, I have to both agree and sort of disagree. Obviously, yes, we want them to be more adventurous and try new things with all different parts of the game, so it doesn't feel like they're creating an MMO within an MMO. But even if they do that going forward, I don't think that's suddenly going to save Final Fantasy XIV. It'll bring some more interesting aspects to it. But then what I see being the biggest problem, and again, this is something they could solve with even just a temporary test server, is if every event comes out and players have to spend 2 or 3 weeks in it before the developers go, oh, okay, we didn't anticipate that, so we have to fix it. We didn't anticipate that, so we have to fix it, and let's alter this. What that ends up doing is you have a lot of people like Senpai who went into it to start with, didn't like it, and decided if this is what it is, I'm done. Now, some people, as it evolves and people realize what's going on and as it changes, some will come back, but some people, after that initial reaction, are not even going to bother coming back, even when it is changed or hotfixed to the way that it should be. And I think that in the long run, that hurts them. Maybe not as much as their stagnant development now, but it's still something that worries me.
But that's the only alternative, is to just keep continuing making dungeons and raids until the end of time.
No, the alternative would be, like we said, to come up with that test thing so that what you're putting out is what you want to put out, not something that the community may end up bastardizing or homogenizing into some way that takes all the fun out of it.
Okay, I mean, but at the same time, though, you know, someone who's going to be turned off by a one piece of content that takes the game in a piece of direction and then they quit over it, like that, there's almost no way to win that battle. Like,
that's probably true too. Yeah,
you know, like, why even try to appease those people? But I do think, you know, again, as we identified earlier, that a public test server, a public test realm would really help iron out a lot of those unintended consequences of a system being put in. I think it's really dangerous to go, okay, let's put out a untested system and see what the player base does with it, and be reactionary as opposed to proactive. That I think that's the difference between those two approaches. Having a PTR is proactive. Mm-hmm. You're actively testing your content before you put it out. Not having a PTR means that you have to be reactive. And being reactive it has a lot more potential for backlash and for things to go wrong.
Absolutely, because when people go to a PTR, they know what they're testing it, and that everything here isn't necessarily going to go live. But I think once, and that's on such a small level too, right? But once things go live, I don't think that it is unreasonable for players to expect that, okay, we're getting what should be at least close to the best version of this content.
I mean, once it's actually out, that should be the expectation. But I don't know. I mean, you know, I think that Square Enix is doing themselves a disservice by not continuing to include a PTR. It's just in general a bad idea. It's a bad way to develop long-term content, and especially, you know, everyone has been dragging Square Enix because of how long Eureka took to come out and all of that. You know, if you're actively testing it and people are able to track the development of it, they're going to be less pissed when it takes, you know, 2 updates longer than you said it initially would, because those people testing it will be like, yeah, it needs that.
Yeah, you know, thinking back to how long it took to develop too. I mean, I don't know how big their internal testing team is, but you have to think that there's no way that they probably ever tested it with a full, what would be a full instance.
144?
44 something people. Yeah. There's no way that they ever tested it to that level.
No way.
No. So the only other thing that I wanted to read from
they just put the NMs into God mode. Or they put themselves into God mode and took down the NMs. That's it.
Yeah,
all they did was scale their levels, and it's pretty clear to tell from the way that the NMs operate that that's what they did.
That's disappointing.
It is really disappointing. Yeah, because you know, I think they're really onto a few few concepts with Eureka. They're basic MMO concepts, but they're onto a few concepts. I mean, maybe that's part of what irks me so much about this, is that it's like you're having to take someone who's been making an MMO for the better part of 6 years and take them back to the basics and go, this is what is basically appealing about MMOs.
Their breakthroughs are stuff that people figured out, 10, 15 years ago, basically?
Yes, yeah.
And it's the whole company, too. Hey, look, we just got a shopping cart feature on our cash shop.
I mean, I think you can see it in other games. I think you can see it in a lot of their, development style. Once they took the Final Fantasy series away from being turn-based, there were no other turn-based games out of Square Enix. What the fuck was that?
Windows Update.
It's not on this computer.
I'm gonna hurt you.
It might be on the Nika computer.
Nika, we're gonna hurt you.
Don't update me. Leave me.
Anyway, so I mean, I think that they would have gotten a better system to the public if they had at least a full instance worth of people to be able to test how the system functioned over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. You can't just give people 24 hours with it. Can't give them 48 hours with it. It's almost like they learned nothing from the 1.0 debacle.
Ooh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they did put that out for alpha and beta testing and then listened to absolutely none of the feedback that they were getting. There were alpha and
you're right.
There were alpha and beta testers that were adamant about, do not put this game out. It is not ready to be put out yet. And they still put it out.
But the pods looked really good. Maximum polygons.
They did. But the thing is that, I think that's the other part. That's sort of the other half of this equation. If you do a PTR, you have to meaningfully take the feedback and criticism into account when assessing the system's overall efficacy, right?
It seems like common sense to us.
And the thing is that, I don't think you even have to look at a single shitty comment. All you have to do is look at player behavior. What are people doing with the content to be able to complete it? Does that live up to your vision? What do you have to do to make it? I think those are all valid questions.
Yeah,
those are all
pretty clear, too.
This is all very basic game developer shit.
Mm-hmm. One other comment here, actually speaking to the idea of basic developer and gameplay stuff. They do say that the next Eureka, whatever area it will be, will have new gameplay elements, which is something that we've heard them say before. They get a little bit more specific, though, and say that it will be such like orders to hunt specific monsters and different methods to improve the basic gameplay leveling process. And they said that if they had these features from the get-go, that it would have just turned into the usual FF14. So they will continue to look for the perfect borderline. I'm not really sure what they mean by it would have turned into the usual FF14 if people had to hunt specific monsters.
I think hunts. But the thing is that these mobs operate so much like hunts anyway.
Well, I think it depends. If the idea is that you were going to put like actual hunts in there where everyone walks up to a board and gets the same specific monster, then yeah, you're absolutely right. It 100% would have. But if you randomize it a little bit and different people need different monsters, then you're starting to group up based on the priorities and the objectives that you have to meet, and I think that that's a little bit more interesting than what hunts were. But I mean, I also get, they're trying to ease people into this, so the idea that they're holding some of their ideas back for the next area, I'm fine with that as well.
I mean, I don't know how fine I am with that, to be honest with you.
I don't think they were necessarily holding it. Well, maybe, because I think they were trying to see how it worked and then build on it, which is what they should be doing, which is why I'm still waiting for Pals of the Dark.
But I mean, they could have done some things very dynamically in there that they just chose not to. For example, the Pazuzu feathers, needing that for your final weapon upgrade.
Well, you could have needed that throughout the whole thing. No. Different items.
Or different jobs require different items.
There you go. That too.
They made it like there's a final boss. He's like the final boss of this one, and with him being one of the Mystic Quest 4 fiends, it's clear that each section's going to have a final boss.
Right, but you could still
but the thing
do
is,
that.
Right, they could have done something similar, except there's there's like a final tier of 3 or 4 bosses, each having an item. So
yeah, I mean,
instead
it's
they
stupid
stream
because I've done Pazuzu so much now that I already have 3 weapons and I have 12 more feathers just sitting there. Like it's really silly and easy at that point.
right. And I think that, I think they did a lot of that to streamline it or make it easy for people to understand. But I think it would have been more fun if it was dynamic.
But this is the thing too, like it's the first step. It's not the best weapon. You can buy a better one with tomes right now. So as long as building on it in the second step, if it gets more complicated, I am okay with the first step being that.
Yeah, okay. I think I'm going to lean a little bit towards Nika now, just based on that. Had they made it more complicated and dynamic, and it's still not the best weapon so far, may have dissuaded people a little bit more. However, that means
there is definitely going to be a final boss. I'm just worried about how they're going to change it up going forward.
Well, exactly. Going forward, I think that at this point, after this first stage of Eureka, that they can start to really step up the complexity and the difficulty of it. And if they continue to have it even just somewhat streamlined, like in the next one, okay, you still have to get some Pazuzu like feathers thing, and then one other one for armor. No, that's not going to be enough for me.
I really like the next area to feel like, Pazuzu is like, would be like one step weaker than just the regular mobs that are hanging out in the zone, right?
Pazuzu, you ungrateful gargoyle.
Oh man, I didn't get that drop. I'm such a fucking failure. Oh well. But yeah, no, I think that there's definitely ways that they can keep making a compelling system moving forward.
I agree.
I'm almost done with it. For the people who bitch incessantly about it like it's the worst thing that's ever happened to this game, that shit I do not understand. I wish someone would call us up and say that, Eureka is just the worst shit that's ever been added to the game, because I'd really love to be able to pick their brain on why they think that. Because to me, if you never did Eureka, it doesn't really change anything. You could continue queuing for dungeons and raids every day if you wanted to. It doesn't really affect anything, and maybe that's the complaint. That I understand. If that's the complaint, that I actually kind of understand.
That's kind of where I'm teetering right now. I still like what they're doing with Eureka, but I'm still kind of lagging behind. I'm into level 9, so I'm about halfway through. Where I should be. But I still can't help but think, like, whenever I'm about to log on or whenever I'm playing, is when the next one comes out. Are they going to offer me a faster way? I think that's probably what I'm waiting for, is if
the easy mode,
right away,
because
like
they've trained me to expect an easy mode after it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
But it's not. I don't think it needs an easy mode.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And in fact, I hope that I get punished. I hope at the end of it, when the next one comes out, there is no easy mode, and now I just have to fucking catch up.
Now that no one's doing it, you're screwed.
Yeah.
I think that would be kind of cool. But at the same time, doing it very, very casually. I'm already at level 18. I've got most of my gear out of it. It's very easy to get the first round of stuff for how worried people were about it. It's very easy to get that first round of gear.
This is not indicative of a relic quest, because people have all 15 jobs of their relic weapons done.
Well, and you just do that by spending time in there. And
it's really easy. Like I haven't done it much recently at all, but I have 2 full sets of armor and weapon for Samurai and Paladin, and I have the Scholar weapon. And I have 12 Pazuzu feathers just sitting there and a bunch of other crystals. I just haven't decided what I want to do with it.
Yeah, the Tiger Fury, a friend of the show, by the way, puts in that if for no other reason, they finally gave us a way to effectively gear other jobs.
That's true.
Nika's even complained about being in raids before that, by the time you get one job geared out, or maybe 2 jobs, like, people are kind of starting to lose interest at that point.
Well, and it's more like it's hard to gear other jobs that you like. Like, I play Paladin and Samurai. I'm currently playing Samurai in the raid, so all my tomes are still going towards Samurai. There's still a few pieces. Like, until Eureka, I wasn't capping my tomes, and now I am. So, I'm still buying tome stuff for Samurai, and I'm not getting any gear for Paladin. So
right.
It's kind of nice that I'm able to keep up with that, even if it's slightly behind. It's still faster than Tone.
Yeah. Someone in the chat, Yoko Sune, says, my question is, why make an entire another area for fate farming? What's the point of just literally fate farming for relic gear? And the idea is, or at least the hope is, that the next area gets a little bit more complicated than that, right? Again, this first area we think was supposed to be streamlined and easy, and there's enough different about it, but there's also enough that's the same about it that people who do just like the easy, casual sort of stuff that FF14s have been doing can still get into it. And in the next area, you start to make things a little more complicated. If like Aniro said, normal mobs are like the Pazuzus of those areas, you're going to get to a point where you can't necessarily just go in and zerg a boss down with a bunch of people, and maybe you have to go at it with smaller groups so that you can actually pay attention to what the actual mechanics of it are. That's what I'd like to see, is mechanics that are more advanced than what we've been seeing in Fates.
Well, and I've been harping on this for a long time too, but more complex spawn mechanics.
Yes.
There are things that you can do that people can do in the world to affect the world, to affect how a mob or the spawn conditions.
More things that could be
exactly. It doesn't just have to be weather. Right. It doesn't just have to be weather or a lottery pop. You know what I mean? Like that.
One of the NPCs mentions how like a great dragon prefers like a certain kind of meat. So then if you actually take a mob that has that to the spawn area under certain weather conditions and kill it, the mob spawns.
That's interesting.
Or there's like three question marks in the world that you have to light in a certain order to spawn the mob.
Tiger Fury also says Eureka has fostered teamwork and cooperation on a larger scale than anything else in the game.
At any point.
That's true.
Well, since maybe Titan.
I also talk to people way more in Eureka than I do in anything else.
Yeah, and we've all mentioned before that, like, definitely the two great things out of this are the sense of danger in the world and the sense of social interaction.
I was playing when I was talking to Cheshire Duck from our chat one of the first days, and when I first got into a party, and we were like just killing stuff for like 10 or 15 XP, and I'm like, I'm saying this out loud, like, we really need to move to a different area so we can get more XP, but I don't know how to like get them to do that. And she's like, talk to them. Oh yeah. Oh, that's the thing I can do.
Wait. Oh yeah, they didn't take away our typing privileges in this game mode
yet.
Okay.
I mean, Venico in the chat saying you guys want Monster Hunter. Well, but Monster Hunter actually utilizes a lot more old school MMO.
Did Monster Hunter is it not Capcom's fastest selling game in forever?
But it utilizes some very solid old school MMO mechanics to be able to function. And I mean, Monster Hunter games have been doing that for a long friggin' time too. You know what I mean? Like, no, I don't necessarily want it to be Monster Hunter exactly, but there's a lot of really clever tricks that you can take from other games and other concepts that you can work in from other games that would work here. There's no reason that it wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been as excited for kind of, now that we've seen Eureka and we know what they could potentially do in the next area, because we know now they're capable of doing something right. I think I'm actually legitimately excited. Not just excited to see what they do.
Now, see, here's I think
hopeful. It was hard.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Okay, I think the real measure on Square Enix's creativity is not their first foray into the system. It's the second one. How much do they deviate from that pattern that they've established that works? This is where Square Enix, time and time again, especially for Final Fantasy XIV, has really struggled and come up short. Is their continued support, the way that they continue to evolve a thing like Eureka has been bad.
Yes,
because they don't do that. They did Diadem, and then they blew down the original Diadem and gave you Diadem 2.0, which was
a shitfest,
which was supposed to fix it and did worse. And now we've got Eureka. People kind of like Eureka, but more so than Diadem. Let's put it that way. It was received better than Diadem was, and now you've got to expand on that system. What are they going to do? If their next step with their next Eureka zone is almost identical to what we have with the first Eureka zone,
the Palace of the Dead,
that spells trouble to me.
Yeah,
that spells trouble to me. If they go and they try to really, maybe some of the things that we're talking about, maybe some other things that we haven't even thought about or even considered, but it ends up feeling like Eureka, but clearly they've put some effort into trying to make it, its own thing. I think that's a step in the right direction. But I don't think that we can fully judge the content until we see where they take the next phase.
Oh, yeah. Eureka is definitely like a multi-pronged
for sure.
piece of content.
For sure. I mean, we can start by saying this initial offering was decent. It was okay.
Acceptable.
It was acceptable. Good word.
Thank you. But I have lots of them.
You have the best.
Words.
Do you have the best words?
The best words.
All the best words?
They're the best ones.
Okay.
Excellent.
I think the real measure, the real litmus test is going to be where they end up taking future development of it.
Because the next iteration can't be acceptable again.
Right.
It has to be more acceptable.
It's got to feel like it's building on something.
Oh,
that's a good word.
I know
something.
I know we say this every single time, right? But because this was acceptable, and I think a lot of us have gotten to the point where all right, we're going to give you another shot now. This next phase of Eureka is really kind of the do or the die. They've kind of been hanging us along this whole time, and now it's at the point where it's like, all right, you've given us acceptable content before in Palace of the Dead, and you've added to it, but you still haven't evolved any of your content. And if they can't do that this time, which from what they're saying, they are, and if they still don't, then it's not something that's in this development team's repertoire.
Last call for calls on Eureka. Limit Break Radio on Skype, 810-515-8715, limitbreakradio.com/Discord. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Or your penis.
Coming up next, we're going to be playing Stump the Hosts for some pretty